and ask how you are keeping. It's so boring sitting all day doing nothing, and cold too. I expect you wish you were in warmer climes. There is nothing to report, only I have lost sight of my right eye. Yet there's plenty worse off in the world.
Next today, a look at issues making headlines in and around the capital. LWT News Weekend.
We've discovered St. Ivel-shaped twin pot, a delicious combination of succulent strawberry and temptingly tasty yogurt. Or, to put it another way, temptingly tasty yogurt and succulent strawberry. Either way, it's still less than half the fat of other twin pots.
New St. Ivel-shaped twin pot.
In a large frying pan, heat 2 knobs of butter. Add a dash of Sainsbury's sesame oil, then 2 sticks of chopped celery, and a little crushed garlic. Now add 1 pound of Sainsbury's large peeled prawns. Stir fry for a minute, then pour in about 1/3 cup of fish stock. Add 3 teaspoons of Sainsbury's Dijon mustard. Thicken with a little corn flour and a splash of medium sherry. Bring to the boil and then stir in a small carton of double cream. Season and sprinkle on some freshly chopped coriander. Serve piping hot with long grain and wild rice. Absolutely scrumptious.
Sainsbury's, everyone's favourite ingredient.
You'd think they'd complain. Complain? When he's wearing that hat. And when they serve tennis pilsner.
Brewed with Czechoslovakian yeast to taste a bit different.
That's right.
On the step!
Is someone pulling your pilsner? These cows live on green grass. The little cow asks, why is our butter so great?
We are lucky cows. We chew the cud and browse. 'Cause we're eating up our greens. It makes our butter taste supreme. We girls all do state that year-round grass makes butter great.
Whatever your taste in music,
enjoy the great taste
of McDonald's delicious golden grapes meals. And just 1 meal will get you 1 pound off
any CD tape or record.
And Woolworths, the one that wants to own McDonald's now.
Schadenfreude. It's a good word, that. It means a malicious enjoyment of other people's misfortunes. Like when you see somebody with a new car and you tell them the price of a Rover 200. That cheers them up no end.
The Rover 200 series from £9,957.
Sunday, Beatles about.
I'm sorry, that's it. I will not have that sort of behaviour.
I can't believe this is happening.
At 7:45, Inspector Wexford investigates.
Who can I talk to? Who would know?
The Ruth Rendell Mysteries.
No one. Please.
Look up what's happening at 8:45 and keep watch with Blue Watch in London's Burning. Sunday on ITV.
In LWT News Weekend this Sunday, the desperate dig, a rescue bid that ended in tragedy.
Hammering homeowners, the nightmare of mortgage repossession.
And the doctor will see you now, but what price NHS reforms? Good afternoon. Also on today's programme, England's rugby heroes. Will they be allowed to cash in on their fame?
And with Labour and the Tories virtually neck and neck in today's opinion poll, I'll be talking to two of their political street fighters, Messrs Banks and Hayes, on an election issue which affects each and every one of us, health.
First, a look at today's news in the LWT region. The body of a workman buried under tons of mud has been recovered by rescuers. The man was working in this 30-foot deep trench at Brocket Hall near Welwyn Garden City when the sides caved in on Friday. 2 men working with him managed to escape. Firefighters worked in darkness and were hampered by heavy wind and rain to locate the body. Police have named the dead man as 33-year-old Michael Stewart from Colchester. An 82-year-old man is appearing in court tomorrow charged with murder. Police are not identifying the man. He was arrested after another pensioner was found dead at this block of warden-controlled flats in Caterham, Surrey. 77-year-old Dorothy Andrus had been beaten about the head. The man will appear before Godstone magistrates. The 95th London to Brighton Veteran Car Run is underway, with 400 cars trying to complete the annual trip. There were some last-minute repairs. And just time for a call home as the latest technology mixed with the more traditional. And then it was off, well wrapped up against the wind and across Westminster Bridge for the 57-mile journey to the coast. You're watching LWT News Weekend. Time now for News Focus. This week, the fallout from the great housing crash. Britain's largest building society, the Halifax, has announced it's going to auction off thousands of repossessed homes because it can't sell them any other way. That means bargains for buyers, but bad news for anyone hoping to sell. Our reporter Lindsay Charlton has been examining what happens in London when properties are dumped in this way. His report begins with a family who lost their home because they couldn't keep up with the mortgage repayments.
We paid £95,000 for it when we bought it in the January. The mortgage payments actually gone up before we even moved in there, but when we actually started getting into trouble was around between September and November.
112.5, I'll take that. 113 from you.
How many mortgage payments did you actually miss?
2.
92.5, 92.5, and 95 from you.
How much help did the building society give you when they realised you were in trouble?
As far as I'm concerned, none whatsoever.
£230,000 then for the first time. 231.
They put in for a repossession order.
Did they explain why?
Just that we were in so much in debt.
As interest rates rose, so the Lambs' monthly financial repayment on their mortgage went from £800 to £1,200. The result, sadly, was inevitable repossession. For them, like thousands of other people in London and the South East, the 80s dream of home ownership became a financial nightmare. Today, all over London, that 80s dream is up for sale again, but this time to the highest bidder. At this auctioneer's sale last January, less than a dozen repossessed homes went under the hammer. This month there are 49, and in December there will be more than 100. In spite of criticisms that they're dumping cheap property, the building societies see auctions as the only answer to a massive financial problem. Are the lenders putting these properties on the market at silly reserve prices?
No, they're not. Our experience shows, and the amount of reporting that we have to do to them, that they're taking a very responsible attitude about how they're disposing of these properties. They ask us to account very clearly how the properties are marketing, what sort of condition they're in, and they seem anxious to achieve the best prices that they can.
And despite the serried ranks of dealers and Vodafones, you could find the odd first-time buyer who thought he'd got a bargain.
It was a semi-detached three-bedroom house in Streatham. It's a very nice house. I'm glad it's good. It's a very good bargain.
You paid £60,000 for it. How much do you think it might have been worth 4 or 5 years ago?
4 or 5 years, probably 100, 105.
But for many who bought then, home ownership has been a disaster. Mortgage arrears are the fastest growing cause of homelessness in the capital. By the end of the year, 14,000 repossession orders will come before London's courts. And nationally, there'll also be a further 221,000 people with mortgage arrears of at least 6 months. The building societies also concede that selling repossessed homes at auction is depressing the market and keeping interest rates up for existing borrowers.
Everybody is having to pay for the number of repossessions and the losses
The mortgage indemnity companies are picking up substantial losses. Lenders are making much bigger provisions for losses than they've done in the past. And yes, all of this is reflected in interest rates that have to be charged. And there's no difference between that and the fact that people who go into Tesco's or Sainsbury's are paying for shoplifters, or that people who borrow money from banks are paying for the fact that Brazil and Peru have defaulted. That is the way of things. It's not something people like.
Despite having 4 children at home and offering to pay £500 of the mortgage each month, the Alliance and Leicester Building Society showed the Cam family little compassion. They're now in a rented home and Mr. Cam is unemployed.
It was very easy for us to be able to raise £95,000 to buy the house. Very, very easy. But there was no one there saying, don't you think it's a good idea to look at this side of it or that side of it? Or why don't you slow down and have another think? It was very, very easy for us to take the money and buy the house. And nobody wanted to know about the problem.
Officially, the Alliance and Leicester told us that repossession is a last resort, but they weren't prepared to discuss any individual case. Did you feel encouraged to buy the house because of the whole emphasis on house ownership in the late 80s?
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah, definitely, 100%. At the time when we considered buying, it was go for it. Give it all you've got. And we went and fell flat on our face.
And eviction isn't the end of the story. Do you know what the Cam's house actually sold for, Lindsay?
Well, it was bought for 95 and sold for 72, and that was after 10 months of squatter possession of the property, in which time the interior was completely wrecked.
So are the Cams legally responsible for the shortfall?
Yes, they are. The Building Society still haven't been in touch with them. They're liable still for at least £8,000 in arrears.
That's incredible. And there's a story within this story, isn't there?
Well, it certainly is depressing the market, and I think the problem is it's depressing the market in certain areas of London. For instance, in the Kent-Surrey borders and in South London, where a lot of first-time buyers bought in the late 80s, they're the sort of properties that are going back onto the market, and they will depress that market further still, and the building societies and the estate agents both accept that.
OK, the tragedy of the repossessed. Thank you, Lindsay. Well, today the Prime Minister boosted the Tory party organisation by appointing Treasury Minister Gillian Shepherd as Deputy Party Chairman. It'll be her job to woo big business for votes and funds. A significant move there, Ed?
Clever move indeed. Gillian Shepherd is, of course, a woman, and John Major has just launched himself into Opportunity 2000. More women, perhaps a woman in the Cabinet before long. Timely, too, because of the Queen's speech. We know her gender, after all. Never mind the golden pageantry, the blaring bugles, the well-leaked legislation that the Queen's speech actually contained. The real political issue of the week has been, once again, the state of the health service and the government's effort to regain lost ground in an area of policy that affects us all. On Tuesday, they unveiled this, the Patient's Charter, 10 public pledges about hospital treatment we ought to be getting and ought to expect in the future. The main points: shorter waits for operations, more information on patients' rights, and a complaints machinery that should work. The opposition parties predictably perhaps call it window dressing. Labour says patients' rights have actually been eroded by NHS reforms. But those reforms haven't stopped. The first port of call for anyone with a nagging symptom is your local GP surgery, and they may be in for a considerable shake-up too. 300 extra doctors' practices are queuing up to become fund holders. In simple terms, that means they'll be given a budget by the NHS and be able to use it to buy whatever hospital care their patients need. The reality, of course, is much more complicated, and it's also a controversial move. The political row here in just a moment with Newham Labour MP Tony Banks and Harlow's Conservative Member of Parliament Jerry Hayes. But first, the view from the GP's surgery. Health Minister Virginia Bottomley mingled with a number of would-be GP fund holders at a private get-together in London on Friday. Among them, Dr. Lawrence Singer from Leigh-on-Sea in Essex. He's likely to be the first solo GP in Britain to be given control of his budget. Going to the doctors isn't what it was in Leigh-on-Sea. These days, NHS, that'll do nicely.
Good afternoon, can I help you?
A corporate smile, your case on file, with a floral touch in a surgery more like Harley Street than Essex. 3,200 patients, but only one hard-working GP, so business efficiency counts. They might call it healing with feeling.
Another deep breath, please, Mr. Jones. Breathe in.
The new face of family doctoring, but not without a manager.
I'm the practice administrator that helps to generate income in the surgery.
Good old-fashioned profit, as we might
Yes, yes, it is.
The two-tier system has been in existence in the past. There's been the private sector where patients have been welcomed and treated very well, and there's been the NHS sector where sometimes patients have had a raw deal. And rather than there be a two-tier system now, we feel we're going towards one-tier medicine, where general practitioners can ensure that the highest standard of care, very much like that available in the private sector, is now available to NHS patients. And the motto of our practice is private care on the NHS, and we feel that we can move towards that for everyone.
And William Waldegrave singled him out as the first lone experimental GP budget holder.
You know the routine by now, don't you? Just goes a little bit tight. In a way, what's happening is that we're cutting out the middleman. It's like going to the manufacturer rather than the wholesaler, saying to the manufacturer, we would like certain specifications met. We want you to do this, we want you to ensure that discharge letters are sent within 7 days. We want you to ensure that when patients are in hospital, they're given fair treatment from the word go, that they're looked after like people, not like numbers, that they're treated in the way that we would like to be treated ourselves, really.
The patient is always right.
Yes.
And if the patient is always right, you say to the hospital, if you don't improve your act, I'll take my patient elsewhere.
Yes.
Money talks in the new system, but they already afford glossy brochures alongside tradition. No private fees, not a bad living either. You've got a posh sports car outside, Dr. Singer drives a Porsche. This obviously works as a business as well, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, yes.
There be money in doctoring?
Medicine is dynamic. It is a constantly changing scenario. Many things that we're doing now we would never have dreamt of even 2 years ago.
But you've got to be a chartered accountant as well, almost.
You have to be in control of your finances if you decide to fund hold, certainly. But you don't need a chartered accountant. We employ chartered accountants to run certain sides of our business.
But business, you've used the word yourself. You employ, 10 people or more, perhaps?
Indeed.
It is a small business.
It is a small business. But that's not the main object of the business. The main object of the business is to deliver high-quality health care.
All right, but if you bust your budget, does that mean if I get very ill, I won't get seen to?
You will get the care that you need whenever and wherever, irrespective of if I go above the ceiling that's been allotted to me. Your care is always guaranteed. If you had a perforated peptic ulcer and you came in to me today and I was well over my budget, you would be in hospital, you'd get your treatment, and you would have the best medical treatment that the NHS can deliver.
Nice to know.
Very reassuring.
Very reassuring indeed. Or is it a worrying trend? Well, with me in the studio, two of the MPs whose party's fortunes at the next election may very well depend on who wins this argument over health. Labour's Tony Banks and Tory MP Jerry Hayes. I'm going to start with you, Tony. There is surely nothing that Labour could object to in the way that GP fund holders are working.
Well, I think there's a lot that we can object to, and indeed
better patient
do
care.
Object to. Well, I mean, you're saying, I mean, you've got the guy's running this like a business. You see, I mean, the idea of the market coming into healthcare, I mean, frankly, it just doesn't work. That isn't the way people see the way the National Health Service should be operating.
But they're not doing it purely on price, are they?
Well, of course he is. I mean, he's
not.
The man's in it for money. I mean, the man's in it for money. I mean, that's the point. The guy is running a business. Now, the point that we're saying here is that if you're just going to have the market deciding how things are going to go, some people will undoubtedly benefit in the better areas. But in the area that I represent, in the East End of London, people are going to be a damn sight worse off. And what we're doing is breaking down the universal nature of the National Health Service. In the end, it comes down to more resources. If the government doesn't put more of our resources into our National Health Service, it's going to be run by a little businessman.
Well, I'm going to nail that shibboleth that you mentioned earlier, because he isn't just in it for the money. He's a GP, he's a doctor, he cares about his patients. I think that's got to be pointed out. He wouldn't be in the business otherwise.
Yeah, he cares about them.
He could be a city broker if he wanted merely to make money.
Well, he's doing OK. He cares about his Porsche as well, no doubt.
You can make money out of the National Health Service. That's Dr. Singer's argument. How do you respond, Jerry
You can't make any additional money out of the Health Service. This is the great myth. He may drive a Porsche, but he's not getting on the backs of the National Health Service. What he's doing is providing a better service. If he wants to get a consultant in his surgery, he can do so. And a lot of GPs are doing that.
You mean it makes them more efficient?
Of course it makes them more efficient. And the patient gets better choice, better treatment. They're not being treated like sacks of potatoes. If he can find them a hospital whereby they can get their operation done quicker, he will do so. so. Now, a few months ago, the BMA was stoutly against GP fund holders. There's a conference coming up fairly soon, and you'll find that the overwhelming number of GPs are queuing up for that status
Jerry,
because it's working.
Yeah, but Jerry, the reason that they will be doing so, and the reason that a number of hospitals are actually applying for trust status, is that if they don't, they're going to get frozen out. It isn't as if this is a sort of a free choice. It isn't as if this is a free choice. It's sort of something that is happening because of coercion, in effect, by central government.
You look at all the reports.
Well, like the 900,000 people that are on the waiting list, the largest waiting list that we've ever had,
not
Jerry.
true. Waiting lists are going down.
Hospitals that are actually running deficits now. I mean, we've got an examination going on in London about the teaching hospitals because it's clearly not something that they can move over to trust status easily. So we've got to look at it.
Tony Banks, are you saying that if GP fund holder status expands, that those who do not become fund holders will be seen as inferior doctors?
I think they'll be squeezed out. It's as simple as that. They'll be squeezed out because the doctors that don't go in there will find that they haven't got the sort of resources that they need. They won't be able to get their patients into hospitals where other doctors who've got budgets are able to say, I want my patient to go into that doctor. There'll be competition throughout the health service, competition between doctors for patients, competitions between hospitals for services. It's crazy. And that's why the people don't trust the National Health Service in the hands of the Tories.
Before you blow a peptic ulcer yourself.
Well, it always makes me annoyed, Ed.
Well, if he does, I hope he goes to a GP fund holder because
it'll be National Health Service, Jerry.
And I hope he goes to a National Health Service Trust too,
Yeah.
because all the reports
more than Mrs.
show
Thatcher ever did.
Not only are the National Health Service Trust working, they're treating more people, they're actually getting more money in, they're spending more money on patient care, but most important of all, the overwhelming majority of BMA consultants are now in favour because, quite simply, they're treating more people. That's what on earth it's all about, not party politics. I wish we could get party politics out of the health service.
It's not party politics, Jerry. It's about the resources available to the health service and the way that we're now seeing competition. And you see, I don't mind competition. If you want a car or you want a fridge or a washing machine, great competition. Competition for patients, competition for services between hospitals in the National Health Service is anathema.
They are introducing these reforms in Sweden, and they started introducing these reforms when it was a mecca of socialism because it works. If it's good enough for socialist Sweden, it's good enough for conservative Britain. We are interested in getting more people treated, bringing the waiting list down.
Well, that's why we've got 900,000 people on the waiting list, larger than ever before.
No, Labour increased waiting list by 48%, we've cut it by 38%.
If Labour win the next election, will you scrap GP fund holders?
I should imagine that GP fund holding along with trust hospitals would have to go because it destroys the universality of the National Health Service.
Well, if I hadn't got a peptic ulcer at the beginning, I think I might have one now. The state of the nation's health, or the nation's health in a state. From now till election day, this issue is certain to cause a bundle of right royal rows in and out of Westminster.
I pray that the blessing of Almighty God may rest upon your councils.
I wondered for a moment if she was going to tell us when the next general election would be.
It's probably a good job she didn't, because the government really needs to force through its controversial council tax well before that election, in the face of Tory critics who say Londoners are going to lose out.
And they will not like it, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I mean, I must bring that out. They will not like it. They will not rejoice on the fact that they're worse off. They will not like it, and it sometimes affects their voting habits.
So they might not vote Tory. And if that argument sounds just a bit familiar, then you must have been watching this very programme last Sunday when Rhodes Boyson gave an exclusive preview of that council tax attack. Meanwhile, of course, poll tax survives, but the can't pay, won't pay councillors are in for a new law to curb their town hall voting rights. As the Prime Minister meant to say, if councillors won't pay, then they can't vote.
If they can't pay, they won't vote.
I actually heard the Prime Minister say, if they can't pay, they won't vote.
If people won't pay, won't.
I hope that's quite clear. Won't pay, can't vote. Don't rush, can't see Queen. Now, there's always a bit of a backbench competition to be up front with the bigwigs when Her Majesty takes to the throne. And Ealing North's Harry Greenway somehow always makes it, even when he's way behind. Now, here he comes, cantering up on the outside, the one in the light grey suit, bright blue tie, and too far back in the queue for a view, surely. But as the Queen made ready, Mr. Greenway was apparently already elbowing his way forward. Here's the photo finish. John Major at the very front, Douglas Hurd, the Foreign Secretary, there beside him, Kenneth Baker one step behind, and yes, remarkably, the diminutive Mr. G has squeezed in with the leaders once again. Don't know how he does it. Well, actually, I do. He skips prayers in the Commons, darts up the inside, and probably uses some of the tactics he picked up as skipper of the Commons hockey team in order to get to the front. Need I say more, Anna Maria?
I think we could have done with him on the wing at Twickenham yesterday.
Yeah, we could have done, couldn't we?
Very useful he would have been too.
Aggressive little lad. Nice chap.
Now then, England emerged as heroes despite losing in the World Cup rugby final. Now the game has to decide how much of the money earned from the team's success should go to the players themselves. This report now from Stuart Maister.
Zips through a bit, Skinner.
While they played their hearts out on the field, Robert Dodds was the England players' only hope of any financial reward.
Top of the Pops want you, and we need about 10 or 12 of you. Can you do that?
He's an advertising man. For the past weeks, the England team has been his product. Their Run with the Ball campaign has raised £750,000 and promoted rugby in Britain. It also offers each player some additional money, about £5,000, and it's this which the Amateurism Committee must decide upon. For the players, though, the signs aren't good.
I believe that the board are determined to resist any pressure that the players should receive money other than for the permitted activities, which are very clearly laid out in the amateur regulations.
But the key for the players is that things have changed since the rules were drawn up. Rugby for them is now much more than a hobby.
There's no way that any of those are not fully committed players who are devoting a professional amount of time to this sport.
Because of that extra time factor, the £40 a day is appearing, peanuts for the majority of the players.
For a select few, though, the IRB's decision is less important. Captain Will Carling is already on his way to a fortune. Outside activities are already lucrative. The Rugby World Cup has made him very marketable.
I don't think it'll affect me greatly. I still will stay very much in my own sort of circle of friends and have a good time. So, I don't think it's going to sweep me off my feet.
Robert Dodds is likely to be involved in the selling of Will.
I guess if you think of Will Carling and probably somebody like Gary Lineker in terms of where does Gary Lineker go next, I believe that Will is a similar sort of person, and so the sort of money that they will get could be substantial.
But for others, there'll be few spin-offs.
The front row are a good example. People consider the front row as the front row, and the pack and these sorts of guys, I think, have less of an individual identity than a Will or a Rob Andrew.
Today, though, the players' minds will still be on what might have been yesterday.
And the International Rugby Board have been meeting today, and any decision about the distribution of funds is unlikely to be known for some time. Now then, the news in and around London this week was dominated by winners and losers, as our Newsfile now shows.
Hello, newsroom.
A 24-hour dispute is over. Brixton prison officers suspend industrial action after being promised extra staff to cope with overcrowding. 1,000 gallons of oil spill into the Thames after a leak at a refinery near Canvey Island. Most of the slick was contained. The luckiest woman in the world. Rhodey Woodcock from South London scoops £2 million on the pools, a British record. The boxer Michael Watson, in a coma for 40 days, begins to respond to simple commands for the first time. Doctors say he's making slow progress. Firefighters at Welwyn Garden City struggle in darkness, heavy rains and gale force winds as they attempt to rescue a workman buried in a sea of mud. Well done, sport. Earl's Court goes wild to celebrate their rugby heroes. And well they might. The amazing popularity of rugby seen by hundreds of millions of people around the world.
I was watching.
You too.
I used to play that game, believe it or not, despite these narrows. I wasn't very good at it. I mean, it did me a mischief.
Well, if Mr. Greenaway could. Well, now, before we close, a look at today's main stories. A rescue bid to save a workman buried in mud has ended in tragedy. Labour MP Tony Banks says GPs who become NHS fund holders will have that status removed by the next Labour government. Speaking on this programme, he said, just like hospital trusts, they'll have to go. And England's rugby heroes are waiting to see if they'll make money from the game's newfound success. And that's all from us for today. We're going to leave you now with a pictorial tribute to the latest addition to the London landscape. This week, the Queen Elizabeth II Bridge at Dartford was opened by Her Majesty at the end of a 3-year construction project. We leave you now with these pictures. A very good afternoon to you.
And it's jolly high up there, do you know? 120.
Good afternoon. The rain and strong winds continue today. Early in the afternoon, many places will be dry and quite bright. However, scattered blustery showers in southern counties will spread north during the day. Tonight, further showers are likely and it'll remain rather windy. 5 or 6 Celsius, that's around 43 Fahrenheit. I'm back at 6:40. Have a good afternoon.
Change to Philips soft-tone light bulbs and feel the difference. Soft-tone from Philips Lighting.
Lady, where art thou?
They drink Carling Black Label. I'll just go and ask.
I move with the times. I want progress, performance. To help defend my eyes from the signs of aging, I've discovered Plenitude Contour Regard Cream Gel for the eyes.
New from L'Oreal, Contour Regard, an eye cream gel with the immediate freshness of a gel and the active ingredients of liposomes.
Contour Regard works in 3 ways. It helps combat the appearance of lines, puffiness, and dark circles.
New for eyes, Plenitude Contour Regard by L'Oreal. Challenge the signs of aging.
After most meals and snacks, plaque pH can fall to levels where acid starts attacking teeth. These attacks can last for up to 2 hours, increasing the risk of tooth decay. That's when chewing can help. Because when you chew for 20 minutes after eating, the chewing action produces more of your mouth's natural defense, saliva, which helps neutralize acid within minutes. So chew Orbit or Wrigley's Extra as part of your dental routine, because chewing helps nature fight the acid attack.
Morning. Morning. Morning, Stacey.
Morning.
Any messages?
Your garage, your dentist, your club, and your mother.
Just a little reminder. If you register for a prospectus for the BT share offer, you could qualify for incentives.
This club would be crazy.
Phone 0272 272 272.
Sergeant Stan Jackson's last-minute decision to attend his unit's anniversary reunion was only made possible by Barclays on-the-spot help. It was an occasion he will never forget. Barclays, when it matters most.
It's not nice to get out of bed and be freezing. I need to be warm.
For all your creature comforts, phone 0800 800 434.
For 20 years, American cities have been scarred by social unrest. Is Britain heading the same way? Watch Special Inquiry today at 1:10 on ITV.
You're watching London Weekend Television. We now join Sue Carpenter at the studios of ITN. It's 1 o'clock.
The news from ITN.
Israelis and Palestinians hold face-to-face meeting. The direct talks at the peace conference in Madrid this morning were to arrange a venue for full-scale negotiations. The Israelis said there'd been a good, positive atmosphere, and Syria has now agreed to meet the Israelis as well, despite an earlier refusal.
Even as the Israelis gathered in their hotel lobby to leave for the first round of separate talks with the Arab delegations, no one quite knew what to expect.
Well, we're going to show up because these are the ground rules. If the Syrians choose not to come, it's going to be their problem, not ours.
And as the Israeli delegation gathered at the Palazzo di Viana, where the meeting was to take place, the Syrians remained firmly at their hotel, still protesting against the Israeli call for the talks to be moved to the Middle East.
The Syrian delegation noted with surprise that Israel insists on moving the venue of the talks into the region and confining these talks to this question alone. This is not acceptable position to the Syrian delegation.
So after a half-hour wait, the Israelis were back in the hotel lobby. The delegation that had gone to meet the Lebanese had also been disappointed.
From our point of view, there's a peculiarity here that we cannot explain. We came here to talk peace. We came at the right time. We came to the right place. We found no one.
All that rather overshadowed what should have been the high point of the day. Alone among the Arab delegations, the Palestinians and Jordanians did attend their meeting with the Israelis. This should have been a moment of real significance, but there are fears among the Palestinians that their first chance to win what they want could be jeopardized by the sort of brinkmanship that went on this morning. No one wants to be seen to walk out of this conference, and it does now seem that the meeting between the Israelis and the Syrians will take place this afternoon. But they haven't agreed on anything more than the time and the place, and even to get that far required intensive mediation and pressure from the Americans. Edward Sturton, ITN, Madrid.
The besieged Croatian port of Dubrovnik has come under mortar and artillery fire again from Yugoslavian federal forces. The city was shelled for the second successive night. The violence comes as the EC peace conference is set to resume in The Hague on Tuesday.
By day, the sound of small arms fire echoes around the mountains that surround the ancient city of Dubrovnik, as its Croatian defenders prepare for a fresh offensive by the Serbian-led federal army, whose troops can be seen clearly moving into new positions just a few hundred yards across the valley. The Adriatic sunsets are spectacular, but they bring terror to the citizens of Dubrovnik. Federal forces appear to wait for day's end to begin the real bombardment. Mortars and shells fired by troops in the mountains and gunboats at sea. Many shells hit the wooded mountain slopes, causing dozens of fires. But mortars also fall on residential areas. The attack appears to be indiscriminate. On Saturday night, a popular hotel just outside the city took several direct hits, mortars dropping through the roof into bedrooms that were being used to accommodate families made homeless by the fighting. The refugees huddled in the hotel's cellars and boiler room to escape the bombardment. This had been an emergency hostel for the very old and the very young. The refugees include hundreds of children, the saddest victims of this war. It's an ironic tragedy that when fighting forced their families to abandon their homes, they fled to Dubrovnik, believing the old city could offer them sanctuary. Now, once again, they find themselves in the front line, the nightly shelling taking its toll. Federal Army commanders appear to be using the nightly bombardment as a psychological weapon to break the will of the Croatian forces defending Dubrovnik. But despite their losses, there's no indication yet that the Croatians are ready to surrender the city they call the Pearl of the Adriatic. Paul Davis, ITN, Dubrovnik.
A man remains in a critical condition today after a bomb blast which killed 2 soldiers at a hospital in Belfast. 6 other people, including a 5-year-old girl, are also recovering after the unprecedented attack. A hospital has never been bombed in 22 years of violence in the province.
colleagues remembered their 2 dead friends this morning, murdered by the IRA as they watched yesterday's rugby final. The devastation in the military wing of the hospital is extensive. Operating theatres have been destroyed and the structure of the building is wrecked. The bomb, which contained Semtex explosives, was placed in an underground passageway which runs between the civilian and military wings of the hospital. It's possible the IRA visited the civilian block beforehand. If so, preventing such access in future will be top of the agenda of the security review. One of the injured remains critically ill. A little girl whose father was also hurt is expected to recover. A Methodist minister was with the girl as she was pulled from the rubble.
The little girl, when she was being carried out on the stretcher, I spoke to her and prayed with her. She told me her name was Susan. She said to me that she was 7 and she told me what school she went to. And I spoke to her and told her that everything was fine and that she would be okay, and we were there to look after her.
This morning, the military wing's chaplain said he believed the bombers must already be living in hell to carry out such an atrocity.
I think one feels a bit numb, actually. You get shell-shocked in both senses of the word, but words can't describe really what any of us feel. So therefore, there's a certain numbness.
Inspecting the damage this morning, Northern Ireland's senior army officer.
After every incident, there's always a review of security, and that's absolutely a standard thing. There's absolutely no indication whatsoever that there was any lack of security or lapse in security here. Yes. It is a hospital, after all.
Nonetheless, Sir John and his colleagues have already met to discuss the implications of yesterday's unprecedented attack. Meanwhile, in West Belfast, a man died at the wheel of his car after a police patrol shot at the vehicle during the night. The RUC hasn't yet said how the man died, but they have confirmed that the patrol pursued him for several miles before opening fire. Jonathan Munro, ITN, in Belfast.
Finally, the organisers of the Rugby World Cup say yesterday's final produced record receipts at Twickenham. The victorious Australians are now preparing to return home after a night of celebrations.
The victorious Australians were wasting no time in getting their newly won trophy out of the country. It was exposed to envious English eyes for just a few minutes before being packed securely away for the long trip home. But after a night of celebration, the mood was a little subdued as they packed up to leave their Surrey hotel.
It hasn't really sunk in yet, but the bourbon and beer that's been sinking into me, I don't know whether that's sunk in yet, but it will in the next couple of days. It's all the time that we've put in over the last 2 years, it's all been worth it now, so it's going to be really good.
At Twickenham, the home of English Rugby Union, there was more mundane work to be done this morning. But at their last press conference, the tournament organisers were hailing the great success of a World Cup, which has generated millions of pounds for the game. The exposure which the players have been subject to has already fuelled the debate over whether they should be given more of that income and whether rugby can stay an amateur game.
One of the great reasons we can run a tournament like this is because it's an amateur game. There are thousands of volunteers. We've sought none, asked none, and got none from governments or local bodies to help this tournament.
I think some countries allow their players to be rewarded, certainly, and what we're asking for is to have World Rugby on the same footing.
One other big question remains the venue for the 1995 World Cup. Applicants so far include Australia, New Zealand, Canada, South Africa and Argentina.
And that's the news this Sunday lunchtime. I'm back with more from ITN at 6:30. Have a good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Another cool, blustery, showery day across the country. It's the southwest that's been taking the worst of it earlier today. You can see them on the satellite picture there. But out to the west, another little band of cloud and rain, and that'll be sweeping across the country during the night tonight. But that is tonight. Come back to today. And plenty of showers being swept in from the west. Indeed, some more coming in towards Scotland as we go through the afternoon. Probably turning to sleet and snow in the mountains. But a little bit of sunshine probably down that eastern side in particular. But as we go through the afternoon towards the evening, across Northern Ireland and into Wales and again the southwest, more heavier and perhaps more persistent showers coming along. As you would expect, quite a cool day. If you see 12 degrees Celsius in the south, I think you'll do quite well. That's 54 Fahrenheit. But generally the average is between 7 and 10 degrees Celsius. That's up to 50. But in the south in particular, with that brisk wind, it will feel quite chilly. Another showery day tomorrow. It's the sunset times. Here's a summary.
Sunday, Beatles about.
I'm sorry, that's it. I will not have that sort of behaviour.
I can't believe this is happening.
At 7:45, Inspector Wexford investigates.
Who can I talk to? Who would know?
The Ruth Rendell Mysteries.
No one. Please.
Look up what's happening at 8:45 and keep watch with Blue Watch in London's Burning. Sunday on ITV.
Next today, a new series of Special Inquiry begins with a report on inner city crime.
What's said over coffee the world over is much the same, but the coffees themselves are surprisingly different. Lion's 100% pure Colombian, Guinean and Costa Rican.
Listen, Steve, we've got to change the world. Call me. Hey, Jeff, the bridge has to be blue, okay? Jenny, that last order was a red herring.
Now, Cellnet Callback takes your messages, then calls you back.
Bill, can you work the weekend?
Cellnet Callback. You don't chase your messages chase you.
Chicken disagrees with me, you know.
It agreed with you last weekend.
Oh, that looks very nice.
It's not for you, Mum. It's my Weight Watchers thing.
What is it, I wonder?
Just salmon and prawns and mushrooms and courgette.
And what are the little herbs?
They're mine.
Nice try, Gran.
Salmon and prawn fricassee from Weight Watchers from Heinz.
Sir.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. A very impressive turnout. In fact, the only person I can't see here is the ambassador. Ah, that's better.
What the devil do you think you're playing at, Latham?
I was about to ask you the same question, Ambassador. Yesterday, you collected rather a lot of money from this man, and today we hear you are to meet a courier in this very embassy. That, Ambassador, is the behaviour pattern of a mole.
It is the behaviour pattern of a man who has lost his Barclay card. First they send emergency cash, then a replacement card.
Oh, come on, Mr. Moley. Yes, Bob, let him in, the more the merrier. A Barclay card? To Moscow? And how do they do that, pray? By motorcycle messenger? Thank you, Sir Wilfrid, for taking part in our training exercise. Realism is obviously of paramount importance. Come on, Bob, untie Sir Wilfrid.
If Clerical Medical do investments, why the funny name? Well, they were set up in 1824 to look after the professional people of the day, like clerics and medics. Mind you, if in 1824 there had been professional photographers, professional commodity dealers, North Sea divers, computer programmers, DJs, no doubt Clerical Medical would have looked after their needs too, just as they do today. Clerical Medical, the choice of the professional.
At 2:15, there's a chance to relive magic moments from the Rugby World Cup. Now on London Weekend Television, Special Inquiry.
The riots in a number of Britain's cities this summer may mark the start of a new and frightening phase of social unrest. What is going wrong in our cities and who is to blame? We report from the Northeast and from Chicago on a problem which may haunt us for the rest of the decade. Good afternoon and welcome to another series of Special Inquiry. Each month we'll be taking a close look at a major question which concerns us all, whether here in Britain or overseas. Today we start with a problem all too close to home. A few years ago, a new term entered our vocabulary, the underclass. In the United States, this referred to people living in large areas of cities like Chicago, New York and Los Angeles who were poor, jobless and likely to commit crime. Most important of all, they were increasingly coming to be seen as a society apart. The underclass, so the experts said, would eventually come into almost perpetual conflict with the rest of society. Well, in the aftermath of the riots in Britain this summer, that idea has entered public debate once again. And if what some people are saying is right, the underclass may become the most daunting problem Britain faces for the rest